Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another episode of Spoiler Sundays. So this is the time of the week where I take a look at all of the Japanese news and spoilers and, well, talk about them. So before I get into the BT11 spoilers, I'm going to be covering a little bit of old news, and that's going to be in the form of their next starter deck being a Beelzemon starter deck. So it's really cool that we're getting a deck dedicated to Beelzemon, and there's a couple of different points to go over that really make this deck something special compared to a lot of the other starter decks. So the first big point is that this is going to be an extravagant Digimon product, so instead of just getting your usual starter deck, this will come with a few extra goodies in the form of your usual deck, memory gauge, and sleeves will be included, which is pretty cool, on top of all of the cards being in foil, which is really nice. And the whole design of the starter deck is for it to be competitive right out of the box, so it's going to act as a really perfect way to be able to get into the Digimon trading card game if you're just starting out. Then, as far as the second point, if you couldn't tell by the image, the theme of it is going to be Beelzemon, but there's going to be several other powerful Digimon in it as well, so it might be a little bit more skewed to being more focused around Demon Lords, with Beelzemon being the star of the deck. But that's just my assumption, and I'm curious to see what other powerful Digimon they're going to be including inside of this starter deck. And then on top of that, the third point states that you have a low rate to encounter a really special designed card in each box, so they're kind of pulling like a little bit of a bushy road, where if you're already buying multiple starter decks anyway, because usually you need to buy 2 starter decks to get a full playset of all of the cards, then you might as well just add a little bit of a chase inside of them, especially with some other cards being included, makes it a really good incentivization tool to want to buy more product. And then the fourth point states that we also are going to be getting some bonus reprint cards, so each box will come with a set of 10 reprints, which is pretty cool, considering some cards that might need to be reprinted. So I hope these reprints are actually good and needed reprints. But in terms of BT11 news, BT11 is going to be coming with its own special reprint in the form of Machinedramon. But in terms of the spoilers, let's just go over what we got. We got about 12 spoilers to go over today. So one of the first spoilers to go over is going to be a new version of Manmon. So Manmon is going to be a level 3 black Digimon this time. He made the transition from blue to black, but he doesn't necessarily keep his defensive ability of blocker from blue, but instead he trades that for some extra protection, where during all turns, this Digimon can't be returned to the owner's hand or deck by the opponent's card effects, so it's kind of like an anti-blue card in a way, because blue is one of the few colors that actually wants to actively bounce the opponent's Digimon, and it's easier to bounce their low-level Digimon, so this is just a good card to fight against blue decks by having a rookie that's actually going to be sticking on the field, making him pretty decent as a generic card. Next up, we got a new version of Codemon. So this new version of Codemon is just going to be a level 3 blocker for yellow, which is okay. I don't think this card is that great or really needed, but it's still just a card that they got nonetheless. Next up, we have Jijimon. So Jijimon is going to be one of the SRs in the set, and he's actually a pretty interesting card to be playing around with. So he's going to be a green level 6 Digimon, and he could digivolve off of green or black, which is not really a very common color combination that we've seen. So it'll be interesting to see how this card's actually used and the support around this card. But he does have 2 pretty decent abilities. So he has a nice when digivolving ability, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, then we get to play 1 tamer from among them for free, and then we get to place the remaining cards on the top or bottom of the deck in any order. If you select top, then they're all going to go to the top. If you select bottom, they're all going to go to the bottom. And then on top of that, he has a nice when attacking ability, where once per turn, for each green and or black tamer we have in play, we get to reveal the top card of our deck, and then we get to play any number of green or black Digimon cards among them with a total play cost of 10 or less without paying their memory cost. Then the remaining cards go to the bottom of the deck in any order. So he's kind of acting very similar to the Agumon that Black had all the way back in BT3, where he's just playing cards off the top for the opponent having Digimon. So instead of relying on the opponent having stuff, it's actually relying on us having stuff, and we could easily set himself up with his when digivolving ability for his when attacking ability to try to free play our Digimon. Next up, we have a new version of Agumon. So this new version of Agumon is sticking within blue, and I really like the fact that he's also sticking on theme with some of the old Agumon cards. So he has an on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add a Digimon card with Agumon in its name, and 1 blue tamer from among them into our hand, and then trash the remaining cards. So it's pretty nice that we get actually a dedicated digger for a more dedicated Agumon deck, so it'll be nice to see what other support cards that he's going to be getting. Then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability where when attacking once per turn, if you have a tamer in play, then we get to return one of the opponent's level 3 Digimon back to their hand. So it's just doing your classic Agumon type stuff where it wants to try to bounce the opponent's Digimon back to their hand, so that way they have a nice healthy hand count, so that way your Agumon stuff can interact with the fact that the opponent has a large hand size, which is what the old Agumon stuff was doing, but I'm excited to see where it goes nonetheless. Next up, we have a new version of Bioman. So this new version of Bioman is going to be another digger for red to be using, which is pretty good, especially a generic digger. So it has the on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, and we get to add 1 red Digimon with vaccine in its traits, which we haven't really had a whole lot of synergy with the whole vaccine virus thing. That Digimon kind of leans into every now and then, so it's nice to see that we're finally getting some here. And then on top of that, we also get to add 1 red tamer from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom in any order. So this is just another really decent digger, because there's just a lot of red vaccine Digimon that we could possibly pair this up with to make something interesting happen. Then on top of that, it has a nice inheritable ability of on delete. If we have a red tamer in play, then we get to gain 1 memory, which is never a bad ability to have. Next, we got a new version of Agumon. It's nice to see that the protagonist, Taiga, is going to be getting some new support, which means we might eventually get some more Tyrannomon support. But for now, this is actually just another pretty decent card to synergize with Tyrannomons, and is just another decent generic rookie for green to be working with, which they always need more of. So it has the nice on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 4 cards of our deck. We get to add 1 tamer from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom in any order. So this is just a green stereotypical digger, which they kind of didn't really have, and we were kind of using some other cards to try to dig out our tamers as efficiently as we possibly could, and this is just doing that a little bit better. And then it has a nice inheritable ability for us to take advantage of, where during your turn, while we have a tamer in play, this Digimon gets plus 2000 DP, so obviously this kind of just wants to line up with what green wants to try to do, where it's digging out the tamer that you want to play, then you're going to have the tamer in play, and because you have the tamer, your Digimon is going to be a little bit stronger, and this is a really good card to try to help flesh out the Tyrannomon stuff, just because the Tyrannomon, more so on the green low end, really didn't have certain tools to be able to compete with the red side, so it's nice to see that we're getting more well-rounded tools for them to use. Next up, we have Bagraman. So we finally know what Bagraman is doing after waiting, 3-4 sets for him in terms of base sets and 2 EX sets for him. So he finally makes his appearance in BT11 after being first mentioned in BT7. So what this card is doing is he is a purple level 6 Digimon that could Digivolve for 5 on top of a level 5 purple or black Digimon. So nothing too special there for having 13,000 DP, so he's going to be a pretty strong level 6 Digimon to be using. And on top of that, he seems to be like one of the better control type cards for Digimon to be playing around with because of what this card is doing and the types of interactions that he's going to be playing with. So he has an on-play and when Digivolving ability, where if the opponent has 1 or fewer Digimon in play, we get to look at their hand and trash 1 card from among it, which is really strong because this kind of punishes OTK-based decks where if they're trying to keep their Digimon in raising, and that allows us to use this ability to try to select some of their combo pieces and be able to discard their combo pieces, being one of the actual true ways we could force the opponent to discard cards outside of Dandevimon and outside of Golfmon. Then on top of that, if the opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play, then we get to place one of your opponent's Digimon under one of your opponent's other Digimon at the bottom of their Digivolution source. So it's basically just DNA digivolving their Digimon, which is okay. It's kind of weird, but essentially it's just trying to act as some removal to get one body off the field, even though it's putting it underneath the Digimon. I guess the whole point and intention is so that way they don't necessarily have access to that Digimon to be used for various different things, but because of inheritables, you could accidentally line up some of their inheritables if they're trying to go wide, but I guess if they're trying to go wide, then their Digimon wouldn't have a whole lot of inheritables. But regardless, it's a good card to use against more stack-heavy decks that are building one Digimon in raising, and it also has some defense against go-wide decks as well, making him just already really strong. And then on top of that, he has a nice strong secondary ability where during all turns, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon digivolves, or when an effect adds a card to the opponent's Digimon's Digivolution source, by trashing one of this Digimon's Digivolution source, we get a trash at the top card of the opponent's security stack. So when they're trying to digivolve themselves, then you get to burn the opponent's security, which is pretty decent of an ability to have. So that way you don't necessarily have to check the opponent's security, and you could just try to passively burn them and control them and limit some of their plays and actions, which is what the whole Bagra Army deck is trying to do. And that just makes him a really good boss monster for the deck. And speaking of the Bagra Army deck, next we got one of the other generals in the form of Lilithmon. So this new version of Lilithmon, stat-wise, isn't doing anything too special, but she does have a nice on-play ability where we get to trash the top 4 cards of our deck, then add up to 2 cards with Bagra Army in one of their traits from your trash to your hand, and place 2 Digimon cards with Bagra Army from their traits from your trash underneath one of your tamers. So she's just helping try to line up your Bagra Army Digicrosses, just because that's still what Bagra Army is trying to do, is be a Digicross based deck. Then she also has a nice ability where during the opponent's turn, when one of the opponent's Digimon moves from the breeding area by trashing one of this Digimon's Digivolution sources, then that Digimon gains when attacking, losing 3 memory until the end of the turn, acting very similar to how Sukuyamon from BT5 was trying to be used, where it's just trying to interact with the act of raising your Digimon, which is something we don't have a whole lot of, and I'm glad that we finally are getting more interactions for that, so that way it kind of punishes, again, these go-tall stack-based decks that are trying to line up their perfect stack and OTK the opponent, so we actually do have more ways to be able to fight against it. And taking a step back from Bagra Army, we knew that we were going to be getting some Cross Hearts support, so we have Shoutmon Cross 7 as one of the first cards revealed for more Cross Hearts support. So this is a pretty interesting Digimon stat-wise, just because he could Digivolve for 6 on top of a red level 5, or Digivolve for 4 on top of a blue level 6. So this is the first time to have separate Digivolution conditions and costs based on their color. So that makes this card pretty interesting to use if you're trying to actually Digivolve up into it, but because it's a Digicross Digimon, most of the time you're actually not trying to Digivolve and you're just trying to hard play the card just because he has the rush ability, so the turn you play him is the turn you'll be able to swing. Assuming the memory doesn't pass on to the opponent's side, he has material save 4, so he'll be able to save 4 of his inheritable sources. He has an on-play ability where it's acting as some good removal, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with DP equal to or less than this Digimon's DP. So he naturally has 13,000, so he'll just already be able to delete a wide variety of different targets, on top of his all turns ability, where for every 2 cards in this Digimon's Digivolution source, then it gets plus 1,000 DP, so he also is going to be able to extend the reach of his removal ability when we play him, utilizing his Digicross ability. So the Digicross is -2, and he has 6 different Digicrosses, which means we could potentially make this card cost 2 if you line everything up. So the Digicrosses are going to include Omni Shoutman, Jijimon, Ballistamon, Darurumon, Starmons, and Sparrowmon. That seems like a whole bunch of different Digimon to have and require, but the Digicross deck and Cross Hearts decks are based around trying to get all of your different parts and pieces, especially under your tamer for you to use for the Digicross ability. As far as the grand scheme of things in the deck that he's going to be going into, I don't necessarily think he's going to be that great of a card in the Cross Hearts deck. He seems more like a spicy tech 1 or 2 of inclusion, just to try to use when you're all out of Shout 4s, but I don't think that the deck really needed this type of a card considering how aggressive that deck is. But as far as a card that they would actually want to use, I think that this new version of Omni Shoutman is actually a really good card. So this is probably going to be replacing King Shoutman in terms of what it's doing for the deck, just because, like King Shoutman, when we use him for the Digicross ability, his name is also treated as Shoutmon. So not only does he count as Shoutmon, he also is Omni Shoutman, so that just gives you different flexibilities on what you could use him for with your Digicrosses. As far as stat-wise, he's just your average level 5 Digimon that also can Digivolve on top of level 4 blue or red Digimon for 3, and then he could also Digivolve for 4 on top of a Shoutmon. So they kind of retroactively reworked how warping works, so that way now it's just an alternative Digivolution condition, which is pretty cool. Then on top of that, he has a nice when Digivolving ability, in case we actually are Digivolving up into him, where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less, and if this Digimon has a Shoutmon in its Digivolution source, then we get to delete 2 of the opponent's Digimon with 4000 DP or less instead, so it's just more removal, but again, I don't necessarily think that the deck is going to be utilizing this card for that ability, but it's on the table in case the situation presents itself where you actually want to. And then he has the on-delete ability of save, so that way when he does get deleted, he goes underneath a tamer to, well, save himself from actually being deleted. Then he has a nice inheritable ability, which is the main draw for the card, and why a lot of Cross Hearts decks would want to use them is because during your turn, while your Digimon has Shoutmon in its name, this Digimon gains security attack +1, so that way it makes your Shout 4 have even more of a punch factor than it normally would, just because of this ability. And then, because we have a new version of Shoutmon, we also get a new version of Shoutman DX for us to use more in line with the Cross Hearts theme. So what this card is doing is he does have different Digivolution conditions, similarly to Cross 7, where we could Digivolve him for 4 on top of a red level 5, or we could Digivolve him for 3 on top of a blue level 6, while him being a 2-color Digimon in red and blue. And then on top of that, he has the ability where this card's name is also going to be treated as Omni Shoutman and Jijimon, well, because he's using both pieces, so it's just a nice easy card to use with Digicrossing, utilizing those card names. Then on top of that, he has the Material Save 2 ability, so that way he could try to save 2 of his inheritables. On top of the fact that he has an on-play ability where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with 8000 DP or less, and then one of the opponent's Digimon doesn't attack until the end of their next turn, acting as some good control and removal. And then he also has an end of attack ability where we get to delete this Digimon to gain 1 memory, so it's just a way to be able to trigger this Material Save ability, so that way we could try to reuse him later, because he does have the Digicross 3 ability, where we could fuse Omni Shoutman and Jijimon to be able to make a new Shout DX. So because it's a Digicross 3 and there's 2, he's going to be reducing his play cost by 6, so that way he's actually going to be costing 7 instead of the 13 to be able to get his on-play ability, but I think this is just more of a for fun card rather than a card that's actually going to be used in a Cross Hearts or Blue Flare deck. And then the last card that we got is going to be the option card for the Bagra Army to use, and it's a 7-cost purple option card, so you could even think about using this in Beelstar if you wanted to try to work Bagra Army in with Beelstar or vice versa. So what this card is doing is it has the main ability where you may place up to 3 Digimon cards with Bagra Army in their traits from your trash at the bottom of one of your Digimon's Digivolution sources or at the bottom of one of your tamers. So it's just allowing you to try to line up your Digicrosses and try to get inheritables underneath your Digimon to use for their various different abilities, because that's just kind of how Bagra Army works, is trying to get rid of their inheritable sources to negatively impact the opponent and try to control and manipulate the opponent. So having a nice reset button kind of helps keep the control flowing, on top of the fact that then if you have a Digimon or Tamer with Bagra Army in its traits, we get to place one of the opponent's Digimon under one of your opponent's other Digimon at the bottom of its Digivolution source, acting as that awkward control tool that Bagraman was already doing, with the security ability of activating its main, so it could be a pretty decent security threat as well to try to help reload your inheritables, because Bagra Army cards also trigger during the opponent's turn as well to, again, try to control and manipulate some of their actions, making this actually a pretty decent option card to be using. But that's all the spoilers that we got this week. There's just a lot of new and exciting cards and tech and tools to think about. There's nothing like super overly insane outside of Bagraman that we got shown in terms of stuff that's actually going to probably impact the meta, but there's a lot of fun things that we could do with the cards that we already got shown, and a lot of possibilities already starting to form in terms of the different tech and tools that we're going to be getting in the set as far as what the other cards are going to be alluding to. So that all just makes me really curious and excited to see where the rest of the set goes. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.